Today on Hearts of Heroes, a flash flood barrels through a Utah canyon.
It was a gorgeous trip, and we could tell something had changed.
Flash flood!
All of a sudden, a huge wall of water starts coming.
There's nowhere to go. You're just at the mercy of whatever that water's going to do.
Our plan was that one of us has to keep going no matter what happens.
Plus,
everyone's happy and excited to be running the 50-miler.
a grueling ultramarathon becomes a winter nightmare.
My mind was getting disoriented. My hands were bleeding.
We've got 87 people that we've got to be accountable for up here on the mountain.
Knowing how these guys were dressed, it would have been unsurvivable.
It would be a daring mission, but these heroes, they wouldn't give up until the job was done. The sandstone canyons of Utah attract hikers and adventurers from around the globe. But these natural wonders can pose hazardous threats.
And when a flash flood roared through the canyons of Buckskin Gulch in Kane County, one hiker found himself battling Mother Nature for his life.
Buckskin Gulch is what's known as a slot canyon, an extremely deep and narrow passageway formed by the erosion of running water.
The majority of the canyon is only probably 2 to 3 feet wide, and the walls can be anywhere from 100 to 350 feet high.
Because of the natural terrain, there are very few ways to get in and out. Ed Smith is a retired Air Force major and avid outdoorsman. He and 2 well-trained friends decided to make the 3-day, 40-mile trek and take on Buckskin Gulch. In March of 2023, the 3 men left Florida and headed for Buckskin Gulch.
We prepped as much as we could. We researched, we checked the weather repeatedly, we spoke to the rangers. We're ready for this hike.
On Friday morning, they made the descent into the canyon.
But hours into the trip, a storm had hit miles away. Ed and his friends knew something was terribly wrong.
When it got colder, the water was rising, we could tell something had changed. You can hear something, but you don't know where it's at.
All of a sudden,
Flash flood!
The 3 men were caught in a flash flood and realized that they had to get ahead of the rising water.
We just had to keep moving forward because, again, you can't go back once you get in there.
There's nowhere to go. You can't climb the walls. You can't get away from it. You're just at the mercy of whatever that water's going to do.
Stay to the left for sure.
Suddenly, Ed and his friends were rushing down a torrential river. The force of the water separated one of the men. Ed and his other buddy knew that their only hope was to keep pressing forward. But now there was another threat.
Okay, that's deep right there.
Ed's friend had stepped into a pool of quicksand and was unable to get out. There was no cell phone service in the canyon, so the friends decided the only hope for rescue was for Ed to forge ahead alone.
Our plan was that one of us has to get to an area that we could get some degree of signal out.
Ed realized his wife didn't expect a call from him until that Sunday, so it could be days before anyone came looking for him.
Coming up, heroes put themselves on the line to save lives.
He couldn't get to me.
the canyon walls here were 300 plus, and so there's no way we could have got to him.
But first, a tip to help keep backpackers, hikers, and campers safe.
There's nothing quite like spending backcountry one-on-one time with Mother Nature. But before you leave, be sure to have a way to communicate with emergency services should you find yourself or others in trouble.
Two-way satellite devices can serve as an electronic safety net. They allow hikers to send and receive messages even if they're off the grid.
Always stay prepared, not just to protect yourself, but to be a beacon of hope should you encounter fellow hikers who may be in distress.
In March March of 2023, Ed Smith and two friends were hiking a Utah slot canyon named Buckskin Gulch when a flash flood took over. After being separated from his friends, Ed's only hope was to try to find a way out of the canyon. But he was badly injured and suffering from hypothermia from all that time in the water.
You have to focus on what you can for survival. And everybody has their focuses. And mine was my wife.
By late Sunday, no one had heard from Ed or his friends. Their wives made an urgent call to the authorities. Rescue helicopters were quickly dispatched above the canyon.
We figured the best way to start was start where they started and then follow down the canyon.
We have a camera on our helicopter that's high definition, color, infrared, which means we can see heat sources.
As they passed the narrow canyon, rescuers spotted something.
There. I got it. Just slowly creep up to your right.
Being in the canyon, everything echoes. And so when you hear it, you have no idea where the helicopter is. You just know it's somewhere above you.
Are we doing good up there? You've got an overhang above you.
We flew down canyon a little bit and found an area that was wide enough that we could descend down in. And so we lowered our rescuer.
Within moments, that rescuer reached a battered Ed and carried him to the helicopter cable.
Safety's going on, safety's on. Bring it up, man in cabin.
Because of the length of the ordeal for him, I don't think he had a lot of strength left.
They flew Ed back to base camp to wait for a second medevac helicopter, which took him to the hospital.
You can't imagine the compassion they have and just how caring they are and what they risk to go through every day.
Ed was then taken to the ICU. Tragically, Ed's two friends did not make it.
Knowing how much they had prepared, how much they had trained, how strong they were, you always ask the question, why?
They did everything right, but sometimes bad things happen.
Despite the heartbreaking outcome, many other people's lives were saved because the wives had alerted rescuers.
The family of Ed and his party were instrumental in helping avoid maybe something even more tragic.
We eventually pulled 18 people out of the canyon.
Following the ordeal, Ed spent months healing from his injuries. Recently, Sheldon Yellen from our sponsor Belfour Property Restoration had the opportunity to introduce Ed and his wife Shiloh to the brave heroes who rescued them.
Obviously, it's an emotional moment. What are you feeling?
Great, grateful, very, very grateful that they were able to find me and get me out of there.
Our families and our friends are truly grateful, so thank you.
It's not every day you get to look the people who saved your life in the eye and thank them personally. And this is great to be able to do that.
We go out and deal with people and help people probably on their worst day of their life. And so it's really neat to see how we all came together, because we don't ever get to experience that.
Yeah. Thank you again. I appreciate it. Thank you. You think that, oh, they're just doing a job, it's no big deal. It's the exact opposite. This is not a job. This is their life. And they put their life on the line for people like me all the time.
Coming up, a punishing ultramarathon becomes a freezing nightmare as runners are caught on a treacherous mountain ridge.
The call was 87 trail runners missing.
Decided to just keep moving along, that we were going to get there.
Ultramarathoners live for the thrill and adrenaline of competing in extreme circumstances. But if the weather turns extreme, these competitions can turn into life or death situations.
And when 87 athletes were trapped in a snowstorm, thousands of feet in the mountains, everyone's life was in jeopardy, including those first responders that were sent in to rescue them.
Davis County, Utah sits next to the Great Salt Lake. It includes parts of the soaring Wasatch Mountain Range. These mountains stretch 160 miles from Idaho to central Utah.
The Wasatch Range in this area has a bench area that's around 4,400 feet, and then the tops of the mountains are around 9,000, 9,500 feet.
You can actually have some moderate, mild weather down below, and then it can get pretty severe up there towards the peaks.
Fortunately, the Davis County Search and Rescue Team, they're well trained for any number of emergencies that might arise.
Davis County Search and Rescue is 100% volunteer. We have about a 40-man roster at any given time.
We're all trained in mountain rescue skills, rope skills, field operations, wilderness survival, and then we have different subsets of our team. The mission is getting to the person who needs help and getting them out of there.
In October of 2021, the Wasatch Mountains were home to an ultramarathon called DC Peaks 50.
Ultramarathons are anything over 26.2 miles. So that could be a 30-mile race all the way up to 100-mile, all the way up to 250.
I love the adventure and the challenge of extreme running. It just gives you an adrenaline high.
Twice the distance of a standard marathon, this race would challenge runners to navigate rugged trails leading thousands of feet into the mountains.
There's a thing called the dry adiabatic rate. For every 1,000 feet you go up in elevation, you lose about 3.5 to 4 degrees of temperature.
You can go from rain to sleet to heavy snow in a matter of minutes.
The night before, we checked the weather, and I saw that there was going to be about 1 to 3 inches of snow in the mountains.
Runner Daniel Combs was new to this form of competition.
That was actually my first. I hadn't been doing them for long.
As Daniel prepared, he was unaware that the winter storm brewing would be that extreme in the mountains.
Well, the night before, I had everything laid out, ready. We were expecting rain and it to be a little bit cold, so that's what I was preparing for. We started at 4 a.m. with the group I started with.
You're with a bunch of people at the beginning of a race, and everyone's happy and excited to be running the 50-miler. That excitement and that adrenaline kind of wears off, and it especially did on this course.
It was about the 5 or 6 mile mark where we started seeing snow, and we started seeing the landscape change quickly in front of us. And we were like, oh my, what's going on?
We shifted from a pretty decent rain into snow and wind. And it was kind of hailing at one point, and the wind was blowing really, really hard to one side, and I could hardly keep my eyes open.
This is absolutely terrible.
Like, all of my clothes were wet. And then I was in sub-freezing temperatures.
That's when we got a phone call from the director saying that they were shutting down the race and that we needed to get to our checkpoint.
The runners were ordered to make their way to the nearest aid station, which was close to 3 miles away. But by that time, the weather went from bad to unrelenting.
It was a full-on blizzard.
As 87 runners were heading deeper into the storm, the Davis County search team sprung into action.
Putting the terrain and the remoteness of it and the weather together, we know that these guys are going to be in trouble, especially if they're not dressed for that weather. The scope of it is huge from the outset. As me and my partner were riding on the ATVs going up the trail, we triaged the runners coming down. Most of them were able to self-rescue and get to the aid station.
Though the volunteers were skilled, they were now battling the same conditions as the runners who were lost on the mountain.
You can't see the features around you. It's snowing really hard, you're in the cloud, and it makes it really hard to discern the terrain, makes it really hard to discern direction.
By this time, many of the runners who could had turned around and made it to safety. But Daniel Combs, Jordan Stewart, and their respective groups were hopelessly trapped in the blizzard-like conditions.
I was getting disoriented, and I started slipping and falling on the snow and ice, and started getting hypothermia.
There wasn't much talking going back and forth. I think we all knew the kind of situation that we were in.
Coming up, the runners struggled to find a way back.
With whiteout conditions, it's easy to get disoriented up there.
We gathered around and we took a selfie just because we didn't know if we were going to make it.
But first, a tip to stay safe during your next hike.
The mountains attract millions of outdoor enthusiasts each year.
But failure to properly prepare for ever-changing weather leaves many hikers out in the cold, literally. Monitor the conditions online before setting out on a new trail. And check with the ranger station if you have any concerns upon your arrival.
While you're there, be sure to give thanks to the rangers. After all, they endure extreme conditions every day to save lives.
When 87 runners signed up for a 50-mile marathon in Utah's Wasatch Mountains, many of them had not checked the updated forecast and had no idea just how treacherous this race would become.
Now in blizzard conditions, the runners' only hope was to make it to the nearest aid station miles up the mountainside.
We realized that was the easiest way to get out of there was to get to the checkpoint as quickly as we could instead of turning back.
But in order to get to the aid station, Daniel's group and Doug's group would need to get to a higher and more severe elevation.
The visibility quickly dropped to probably 30 to 50 yards. You couldn't see very far ahead of you.
Meanwhile, Daniel Combs was suffering from the onset of hypothermia.
My mind was getting disoriented. My hands were bleeding. Someone had given me their poles to work with to try to keep me from falling, and my bones were shivering.
Even though they were all facing potentially deadly conditions, Daniel's fellow runners, they refused to give up on him.
I had fallen a number of times, and they did gather beside me to make sure that I didn't fall again, and were holding onto my shoulders to make sure that I got there.
Jordan Stewart and his group were attempting to make their way to the checkpoint when they came across Daniel, who was being helped by his fellow runners.
He was in really rough shape. The snow and the rain had frozen to his hair, and his hair was just a big icicle. And just by looking at him, I knew that hypothermia was right there. It was on the doorstep. You guys good? I stopped and I asked him if he needed any help because he looked like he was getting close to the point where he wouldn't be able to keep going.
No matter what, I just need to keep moving along, just keep moving along, that we were gonna get there.
But when the runners finally made it to the checkpoint, they discovered it was already evacuated.
Right after the aid station that we came across, we gathered around and we took a selfie just because we didn't know if it was gonna be our last time to take a picture or that if we were gonna make it.
Just then, rescuers encountered Daniel and his crew.
It was like a miracle happened. I mean, I saw them, I'm like, oh my goodness, we're gonna make it. We're really gonna make it.
He was hypothermic.
When someone has hypothermia, you have to get them away from what's causing the hypothermia. In this case, wind, right? We had to get him out of the wind.
So there was a side-by-side that got abandoned up there. They decided to rehab him at that side-by-side. They'd put a tarp on the back side of that to keep the wind from coming through.
Wasn't the best of all shelters, but it was shelter from the storm.
But Daniel was in grave danger. They had to get him off that mountain fast.
We realized that ATVs were not going to make it to the patient. So from there, we had to call on other resources with snowmobiles.
After navigating the treacherous terrain, Brent Jensen arrived at the makeshift shelter. There, he found Doug Shipley, who had been treating Daniel.
Daniel really had a hard time even standing up. So we walked him over to the snow machine and loaded him on the front of the snow machine.
He told me to hold on to the front of the snowmobile. It was frightening, holding on for dear life while we were going down on the snowmobile.
And I just kind of rode out the snow machine with him on the front of the snow machine down to some vehicles where we could load him in and get him out of there.
Daniel was transported to safety.
It was exhausting. It was really physically demanding. We were very tired when we got down.
Despite the danger and turmoil, the rescue was a success. 87 runners made it out that day. And a new respect was forged between the rescuers and the runners who bravely faced this storm.
That's the cool thing about the running community. They started just shouldering, helping each other hike out, and they are some of the true heroes in this situation.
The real heroes were those runners that helped their fellow man. You know, somebody they don't even know, they helped them along, got them to us, and we picked it up from there.
from the few runners that stuck with me to the first responders that took care of me. Yeah, there's a lot of heroes.
There's an old saying, with great risks come great rewards. And all of these heroes took some really big risks.
But the reward was knowing 87 stranded runners made it home to safety. And our reward is you watching. We'll see you next time on Hearts of Heroes.